Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we're back again with another little bit of our tips and tricks for Don't Starve Together. Moving on down the list from 11 to 19 and going from there, maybe even including the 20 tips that I would do for the next steps. You know, pretty much what I'm doing here is showcasing how I play Don't Starve Together. If you get lost, you can always go back to my previous video where I showcase the first 10 things to do in DST. Okay, so what I've done previously is I've cooked up my berries and I've actually ate them after they're cooked. The reason for doing this is it gives you better resources for actually cooking it up instead of just eating it raw. Certain ingredients will actually give you better benefits for cooking it rather than actually just eating it while it's just raw. So let's go on down the list as in the next few things that we want to do. Okay. So we have a bunch of stuff in our inventory that we probably want to bump up a little bit. As I said before, I always try to keep a lot of twigs and a lot of grass and a lot of rocks. So the next few days, as our hunger is exactly where we want it to be, is going to be further exploration, plus combined with gathering more food, plus combined with gathering more resources. So I'd probably say try to get yourself set up with around 20 to 30 grass. The same goes for twigs, and try to get yourself not in a situation where you're fighting any enemies. Now, sooner or later, we're going to get attacked by our first set of hounds, but let's not worry about that just yet. As our next tip is currently right now, which I said, gathering resources while exploring the map. It's super crucial that you explore the map of Don't Starve Together because you want to know exactly where your enemies are and where your actual resources are. So for example, if you have an area that has a lot of berries like you see right here, you want to know that you can come back here anytime, specifically after another few days, and gather more berries, as all this food is all replenishable during actual autumn. And then of course certain seasons will have no way of actually getting any more of them, but you know that you can come back here every now and then to pluck them when they decide to regrow. Okay, so we're gathering resources and we're doing it one step at a time, and then we're also trying to find another biome that might have a lot more rocks in it. So as we have right now, we have a lot of twigs, we have a lot of grass, and we're continuously exploring it further and further. We want to make sure that we refill our logs by chopping down trees and making sure that our inventory stays nice and flush with pretty much everything that we need. Niter and things like that are probably on the sidelines of things that we're going to need, as it doesn't really matter right now. You might ask yourself, what is niter for and why did it actually appear in my inventory? When I chop down those boulders, the niter appears and it actually goes in your inventory because it's part of the boulder, which will eventually need to be something that we use for summertime to keep us nice and cold. Niter powers an endothermic fire pit, which keeps us chilly during the summertime, which will beat down on us with a ton of the sun's rays. And we need certain things to actually keep us cool, including the cold fire and making sure that we get ourselves a thermal stone. But these are things that you want to learn late game, so let's not focus about it right now. Okay, I said it before and I'll say it again. 20 resources of each is more than enough that we need, and once we have that, we are pretty much set. Okay, we're missing still some rocks, and we're missing ourselves some gold, and we're missing a little bit of logs. So we want to go into a biome that probably has all this stuff, but as we wander around, if you can pick up carrots and other things, might as well do so. One thing that I'm also looking for is anything and everything to do with touchstones. Touchstones are extremely important to find because they'll give you a resource called I call them pig butts, but pig skins that you can use for making yourself an actual helmet. Now, if you don't find that, that's not a huge problem, but we want to focus also soon enough on actually how to attack things and possibly catch some stuff. So keep on exploring, keep on going through the process of exploring the map and making sure that you keep getting more and more of the map explored and explored and explored. Pretty much what you're doing, I would say within the first 8 days, is trying to get the entire map explored. It might take you longer than that, so don't worry if you end up, taking 15 days or 20 days or whatever it is. Haha! Now, this is probably going to be a late game tip, but finding the Chester eye bone is something that you definitely want to do. It'll give you none other than a free backpack or a free little creature that's going to follow you around that we can use to store some accessories inside of. So if there's any crap in your inventory, or I should say junk in your inventory that you don't want to keep, well, go ahead and put it inside of Chester. So pine cones, some niter, maybe some seeds, just stuff that you don't really want to keep on you anymore, you can now keep it inside of Chester. And Chester is just more inventory space. If you're playing with friends, this is something where somebody might just say, can I have Chester? Well, here you go, friend, have a good day. Now, I would say one of our next steps is finding out if your wormholes are any good. Feel free to go through your wormholes knowing that your sanity is going to start to diminish a little bit. Aha! We found one! We found ourselves a nice little rock biome. Perfect. Okay. If you come across a rock biome at any point in time, try to gather as much rocks and also your gold boulders as you can. But remember, try not to use too much of your resources, because obviously you're going to diminish all of your flint. So what you want to do is gather a lot of your boulders that have the gold going through it, and then gather as much gold, because as I mentioned in my previous video, what is the gold going to be used for soon? And that's going to be for some golden tools. One golden pickaxe will last a lot longer than anything that your regular pickaxe will do. So try not to use too many of your resources to gather all this stuff, but you know, if you have a bunch of pickaxes, or if you've already made a bunch of pickaxes, you might as well use them now. Pretty much what I do from here on out is just keep mining and mining the rocks. What I like to do is get my rocks up to around 20, and actually my gold up to 20 as well. But looking on our map, you want to be careful from any types of things that you see on the map that could attack you. And right here is a tall bird's nest. You can tell that because of this gigantic egg that is just sitting here. If I decide to go back through that wormhole, it's going to be the red marked run right here. However, our base is just in this corner. So for example, if I wanted to go back and I wanted to actually go through the process of making myself a golden pickaxe, well, I'd have to walk a little bit far. So stay away from the tall birds if you can help it, because they do a lot of damage, and I really don't want to get yourself into any danger if you can try to avoid it. And as always, keep going for the rocks that have the gold in it. That's what you want to have at this point, because it's going to be the things that we're going to need late game. Try not to put your eye anywhere close to the tall bird, and if you get yourself in any trouble, well, it's not a huge problem. Chester being attacked is actually a good thing, because Chester will just replenish and regenerate if he does end up dying. Okay, so we have a lot of gold and we have an actual decent amount of rocks, but I want to gather a little bit more. The problem with Chester following you around is exactly what I'm talking about right here. Is Chester's going to continuously encourage this tall bird to actually attack you, but the bonus is about a tall bird is the further it gets away from its egg nest is the better, because when it actually gets away from its egg nest, you can either go back and steal it, which I would not recommend doing, or it'll just follow itself back. It has kind of like a certain distance that it goes before it eventually says, okay, I need to protect my egg, I can't attack you right now, and then it runs back. But if you steal its egg, that's a whole different ballgame. So try to avoid stealing its egg if you can help it, unless you're super hungry or whatnot. All right, we're in tree territory, so let's gather up a bunch of trees. Trust me, when we go back to our base, we're going to be able to make a ton of cool stuff, and we're going to basically kill a lot of our tips that we actually have to get through, as you know, we want to survive further and don't starve together. Now, you might be looking at this video and saying, is this a guide for tips and tricks on Don't Starve Together, or is this pretty much just like a walkthrough on how to survive day 3 to 4? Well, it's a little bit of both. As I said before, I don't like making videos on basically hop, skipping, and jumping to being like tip 1, tip 2, tip 3, tip 4, and you not knowing how I got there. So what I'm doing right now is basically walking through on how I survive, but also focusing on some high points onto actual focus things for yourself, so you don't get lost in DST. So you can come back and say, okay, the first tip was making a torch. The second tip was making a pickaxe. The third one was making and pre-crafting a fire pit. Next was making a science machine. And you go down that list. Those are your tips to know to what to do next, so you don't get lost and you don't focus on something that might not be actually something that you should be looking into. Our resources are pretty plentiful because we've actually gone through the process of making sure that we have a lot of in our inventory and making sure that we use the things that we need to without overusing certain items. One thing we got to remember is keeping our hunger nice and full. Okay, so this is going to be something that I really want you to focus on doing before we head back home, and before it gets to pretty much the day that the hounds attack us. If you find a small patch of trees, 3 or maybe a little bit more than that, grab your torch and let's have some fun. Light up the trees. That's right, set them on fire. Do not walk away from them, but don't stand too close to them so you're not going to burn. Find more trees by themselves and continuously set them on fire. I want you to get maybe about 6, 7, 8 trees. Try to make sure that they're not too close to other things. If they're next to other trees, that's okay, as long as they're not connected in any large forest, because you're not going to have a good time if you decide to burn up those. And now we just sit here and wait. Now is the perfect time to organize your inventory. Anytime you sit still for any amount of time, spend that time to organize your inventory. Make sure things look nice, maybe feed your character up a little bit, get your food where it needs to be. Okay. Chester eyebone there, things are looking proper in our inventory, and this is the next tip that I want you to do. Burning up the trees to get yourself some charcoal. Get your axe ready because in a few seconds, all these things are going to turn to charcoal. Wait till they're completely done and not smoldering anymore, because if you decide to chop them while they're smoldering, you could take a little bit of damage. So chop down these trees now that they're through the process of actually being completely burned up. Some big trees will still drop little bits of charcoal on the side, so you can get that without actually chopping them down. But gather as much charcoal as you can. And get more and more and more as you can. If you get more than I do, say if you get like 20 or 30, that's actually a good thing. But I want you to get at least 8 to start. Okay, now we want to go back through the portal, or we can pretty much walk back to our base. As this portal is pretty much going to just bring us back over here, it's pretty much the same distance as walking there. So let's get back. We have exactly what we need in order to make what I want, and that is the next step for making a crock pot. Crock pots are really important for late game stuff, as they're going to be ways for making us any type of, none other than, meatballs and some good recipes. And if you are walking back, try to walk on a path. If you can't see what a path looks like, it looks kind of like, I don't know, like tiny little bumps in the road, which you can see here. It looks like a different area, kind of like a little trail. It'll help your character walk a little bit faster, not much, but enough to make your character walk faster home than they normally would. And of course, if you have a walking cane, which you will not have a walking cane right now, you can walk even quicker. But for now, we're just, going to go along the trails. And the trails will stop, so don't worry about that if that ends up being a thing. Okay. So we have what we need. We have our charcoal. We have a lot of rocks. We have a lot of logs. So we're pretty much good to go. And of course, if you have any extra crap like you did before, feel free to put that inside of Chester. So another tip, follow the roads. It'll make you walk faster and it'll make your life a little bit easier. We're back home and here we go. The bonus about your new fire pit now is anytime that your actual fire pit will go down to 0, it's going to shoot out a few charcoals, which just helps us late game. Now, you can see that our luxury axe and all these things are now lit up. So we'll showcase that in a second. But first, before we do that, we want to make ourselves a crock pot. So we have 6 twigs, we have 6 charcoal, and we have a bunch of rocks. So click on this now that we have our alchemy machine, and this is going to be the next thing to survival. A nice little crock pot. Sooner or later, the last step that we're going to be making here is our little tiny ice box, but let's go to our next step, which is improving our tools. Let's keep our pickaxe and our axe, but what I want to do is I actually want to leave Chester here. Might seem funny that I'm going to leave Chester alone, but it's an easy way of making a little chest in our inventory or in our base without any worries. Feel free to eat seeds as well. Anybody that tells you otherwise, I don't know. I don't know why people are so scared of eating seeds. If you want to make another crock pot, you can, but we are limited for twigs right now. So let's keep our stuff behind and, bring back anything that we need. What I like to do at this point is focus on our ice box, but we don't want to make it yet because we need a very important ingredient called gears. So, moving forward, let's make ourselves a golden pickaxe. Let's make ourselves a golden axe. And let's make ourselves a golden shovel when we get enough twigs, that is. So we're still short on twigs. We have to worry about that later on. What I like to usually do is at this point, leave yourself behind a little bit of logs. Put them next to the campfire in case you need to make some stuff. And in the morning, we'll head on out. Now, open up your map at nighttime, which is okay to do, and look around for an area that looks almost like a different or checkered color area. This will indicate where things would be like a clockworks that we're looking for any type of gears. We can also get gears by digging up graves, but graves I don't really like doing that because we're going to remove our sanity a lot and that could cause some issues. So let's not really focus on graves, but we are looking for gears and we're also looking for some more twigs. We know a lot of twigs are obviously right next to us here, so we might gather them there. But next up, and our next big thing is looking for none other than gears and potential ways of getting food. So we're going to need lots and lots and lots of twigs. Sooner or later, we will get attacked by hounds too, so we got to be a little bit cautious. But the first things first is we want to make sure that all of our food is going to turn into something better than just eating a pile of berries. So let's go get ourselves some food. Okay. Let's grab some stuff that are close by if we can. Like I said, the twigs are nice and easy to get, and they're right next to our home. Try not to dig up the twigs if you can with your shovel because it's just going to remove them. You're just going to have to replant them all over again, which actually resets the timer on how long until they actually come back again. Gather grass and all that other stuff because what we're about to make here is something that's going to be really easy but take a lot of resources from us. Okay, so saplings, grass, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I'm gathering lots and lots and lots and lots of twigs and lots and lots and lots and lots of grass. Because what I'm going to be making here soon is our little friend, the handy dandy little trap. And this is just a regular trap that will be used for catching anything, whether it's a frog or whether it's a spider or whether it's none other than our little tiny little friend right next to us known as a bunny. Bunny rabbits are pretty much easy to catch, but you pretty much are going to put them over top of their little nests and then wait till morning for them to come out, and then hopefully that's the easiest way for us to capture them. But also, if you want to fight against any spiders, you can fight those anytime, and that's probably the easier way of doing it. So yeah, let's probably just focus on some spiders, because I think spiders are a good way of getting good monster meat, which could be used for a lot of resources and recipes inside of our crock pots. If we get ourselves a little tiny morsel is what we would get from killing a bunny. Unfortunately, sometimes we can end up with bunny stew, which sometimes is a good thing rather than a bad thing. Okay, so as we approach next to the spider den, I'm going to showcase exactly how this would work. Stepping on the spider silk that is around it will actually trigger the spider to come out. If it's a tier 1 spider nest, you're not going to be in that much of a pain. If it's a tier 2, meaning another little layer of the cake or spider den, then you're going to be in a lot of pain because those things are going to come out pretty strong. And if it's tier 3, then you're going to be in even more pain. So early on, you want to focus on this. You can either do one or two things. You can place a trap out right here and then walk on the nest or in the vicinity and try to trigger the spider to come out. As it comes out, it ends up in the nest, and then you go and pick up the nest, and then you kill the spider, and in hopes you'll get yourself some actual meat. But in this case, that wasn't it. So rinse and repeat the same method if you want to do it this way. And of course, if it gets a little bit closer, you can just attack it. You may need armor, you might not need to equip armor, but with only one spider attacking, it shouldn't be that big of a deal to actually stun lock it. Most spiders that come out of it are going to be easily stun locked, unless you have more than one. If more than one decide to attack you, well, equip your armor that's in your number 2 spot, and just by pressing the number 2, you can easily attack more than one spider. Okay, so let's move on. So we have a bunch of ways that we can put down some nests over here and over the rabbit holes and try to catch a bunch of rabbits, or we can do it closer to home. What I usually suggest doing is putting it closer to home. That's what I'm talking about, these traps. So put the trap on there and wait a few seconds, and sometimes you'll get lucky and the rabbit will eventually be on there. And even off-screen, rabbits will still fall into the holes too, so don't worry about that too much. The reason why I suggest doing this next to base is because the closer to base it is, the less likely you are to actually forget about checking the nests. And sometimes, for some odd reason, they'll go to the nest and just make them fall over, so don't worry about that either. But as you see, lots and lots of grass gets used and lots of twigs get used from these nests. But if we end up getting some food, well, that's a good thing because we're obviously going to need a lot to survive. So this is another tip, is making yourself some nests. If you want to do it the hard way of actually going and fighting a bunch of spiders, that's okay. If you want to use the actual traps to fight them, that's okay too. And it gets easier and easier depending on what method you decide to use. So once again, as time goes on, I want to replenish all my resources, but I won't do that right now. Okay, so our last little tip that I'm going to show you in this video is how to make yourself an easy little recipe. We've went ahead and we've killed our first little spider, obtaining our monster meat, and guess what? Ba-ba-boom, we can start making our stuff in a crock pot. When using monster meat, make sure that you don't go over one monster meat, as you're going to be ending up with the worst recipe in the game, or one of the worst, I should say, which is monster lasagna, or like some goop, but you don't want that. It's going to be monster lasagna, but yeah. Anyways, you're going to add 3 filler to it. So, of course, you can add 3 berries. You can also add 3 butterfly wings if you want to, but I would say keep those for healing. And then when you click cook, you will end up with a meatball. If you don't see that side menu there, it's because I'm using a single player mod, which shows it's called the craft pot, which indicates what I'm about to make every time. Now, instead of eating 3 berries, I'm going to consume 1 meatball. That's going to fill me up quite a bit. For 62.5 hunger, to be exact. And bam, now my hunger is like all the way through the roof. Now, I'm going to go grab a rabbit, I'm going to murder said rabbit, and I'm going to rinse and repeat the same method. Using berries will give us the same thing. So 1 morsel, 3 berries, and ba-boom, another meatball. Of course, I don't want to eat it. One thing to remember is if your hunger is almost at the top, eating a meatball is worthless because you're not really getting the full value out of the meatball. So try to fill your face with something else if you can. There we go. And last but not least, before we log off, we want to make ourselves a little handy dandy little chest, as we already have Chester here, but we might as well make our base look even more fancy just by making our very first chest and start putting some resources in it that we might need late game. Some silk, some other stuff. And maybe all the stuff that is inside of Chester, so we can actually bring Chester around with us to gather any more gunk that we need. And sooner or later in our next video, we are going to showcase on how to actually get yourself none other than our favorite little thing, which is hopefully finding some gears if I can. Okay, there we go. That is more tips and tricks than we have probably wanted to showcase, but I hope at this point you're starting to survive a little bit further in DST. I probably showcased quite a few more tricks on actually how to survive, and guess what? We now have our full set of golden tools, and we have still a decent amount of resources. Okay, there it is. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.